came to American University Library in 2003 and came to us from the DC Public Library. She has also worked as a librarian at the Brookings Institution and the Washingtoniana Division of the Martin Luther King Jr. Library, and the Tenley Friendship Neighborhood Library, where she was manager for quite a number of years. She has written a number of book chapters, most recently contributing a chapter on Tenleytown to the book called Washington at Home, which was published by the Johns Hopkins University Press. So not only is Catherine a very active librarian, she's also very active in the local political scene. She was twice elected to the DuPont Circle Advisory Neighborhood Commission. She has served as the president of the League of Women Voters in the District of Columbia, and a number of other positions. So we are delighted to have Catherine here to talk about how to find out what's on the ballot and who these people are.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. We all know who's running for president, but many of us don't. Excuse me. I just get all cracked up with my with my topic. Excuse me. Maybe we can restart this over again. Let me just grab some more. Excuse me. Okay, we all know who's running for president, but what we call in the trade the down ballot issues are the ones that people often need to know about. And so as educated consumers, we have to figure out how we find out what's on our ballot before we get into the voting booth, because you might get there and find out they're constitutional amendments you're being asked to vote on. They're positions that you might not even know exist that you're asked to vote for a candidate. And as responsible citizens, we need to try to find these things out in advance. And the League of Women Voters was established in 1920. It was in a direct outgrowth of the women's suffrage movement. And since 1920, we've kind of made it our mission to provide quality, nonpartisan information for voters so that they can go into the voting booth and make good decisions, because our lives depend upon it. So a number of years ago, in the olden days, the League used to call candidates, and the candidates would write out their answers, and then we would type them and send them to the press. But then the wonders of computers came, and we now use software where the candidates can actually input their own answers to our questions. So this is really what you see here is what the candidates have provided. We never edit except for length. So the first thing I want to show you today is what we call Vote 411, and those of us who remember telephones, 411 was the information number. So this is information for voting, and it is .org. It is nonpartisan. It's we're a 501c3. So if we just go to up here, we put first there. You will find a widget here where you put in your address, and it will tell you what's on your ballot. And what's really kind of magical about this is it uses GIS files to take your address and find out what ward, what precinct, what your geography is, so that it brings up just what's on your ballot. So I thought I would just show you DC, Bethesda, and Arlington, but you can do it for your own. If there is no league in an area to ask specific questions, we try to at least load what's going to be on your ballot so you can take a look. So for instance, I just am using the library's addresses. So here's the Bethesda Library, 7400 Arlington Road. And if you lived at the library, this is what would be on your ballot. So here we have lots of information for the voter, what day you vote, the deadlines for various things. And right here, the big green bar will show you what's on your ballot. So the people who live in Bethesda have this many choices. I think we can skip right over the president because we know who's running there, and I'll just show you a few examples. For instance, who's going to run for Senate? Let's take a look. There are this many choices that people in Bethesda will be presented with. The way it works is you choose two candidates to compare. So for instance, if you wanted to compare the first two, it'll bring up their answers side. First, it'll tell you what the description of what you're voting on, what their term is, what their salary is. Here's how you find out more information from the candidate. And these are the answers that the questions that the league posed and the answers that were provided. So you can kind of compare side by side what people are thinking. If you want to say, okay, well, I like one person, but I want to take a look at what other people are thinking, I might say, okay, well, I'm going to look at the incumbent, but I want to now compare him to the Green Party candidate. And so I can go through all the candidates and compare them side by side, deciding which one of the two I like best. Perhaps I would decide to go with the incumbent, perhaps not. But if I did, I could select this candidate, these are for myself, and then it will take me immediately to the next race, where I can see that there are 4 people running for Congress. And I go through the same procedure. I might say, well, let's see, let's look at the first 2. And I might decide, after reviewing all this information, I'll select that candidate. It'll take me to the next one. We've had trouble getting judges to participate in our voter guide, and I don't know if it's because they don't want to put anything on record. I don't know. They don't tell us. But when they don't participate in our guide, we at least tell you what you're voting on and who's running. This fellow, Dan Friedman, is running unopposed. Maybe he felt he didn't need to participate. So anyway, you can continue. You can go through and mark the various candidates. Oh, yes?
Good question. If we don't have judges, it means we as citizens don't have the right to vote for anything.
Every jurisdiction determines whether their judges are elected or appointed. There are advantages to each situation. Some people feel like judges should be selected by a commission of professionals because a judge shouldn't necessarily be a popularity contest. Also, if judges are running for election, they can be influenced by contributions. I don't know how much you follow what's happened in Wisconsin with their Supreme Court, but their Supreme Court is elected, and there was a lot of what sometimes is called dark money. There was a lot of money that was, involved in electing people, and then one of the PACs that supported the judges was sued, and it came before the judges who'd taken money from that PAC. And according in Wisconsin, it's legal. So it's like some states.
If I live around here, as you said, Bethesda.
When we've concluded our discussion, then you can do it here if you like. We can put your address in and see what comes up on your ballot.
Yes, thank you.
So, yes, but these are all really good questions because these are questions that you'll be faced.
I will apologize in advance. We are new voters.
Excellent.
That's why we are here, trying to get the best of them.
Well, we find that sometimes the new voters are the best prepared. Of course, sure. All right, so after you've gone through and made all of your selections, we actually have a ability to either email your results to yourself so you can take it to the polls, or you can have it on your phone to take it to the polls with you so that you don't have to say, oh, which one of those people did I want? I remember reading them, but now I can't remember the name. So that's the other way this will help you. We also have, whenever we hear about them, candidate debates, we'll put the debates on here too. But we have to hear about them, and they have to be nonpartisan. If they're just having debates to highlight one party or the other, the league won't advertise it. The other thing about the league is that we never support or endorse any candidate. So we don't tell you for whom you should vote. We just tell you this is information, go forth and do the best you can. Right. So let's go back and take a look at another jurisdiction, and I'll show you how different they look. So this is the Tenley Library, if I lived at the library. So here's my information about DC. I can also find out what I need to take with me to vote. I always encourage everyone to take a current ID with you. In most places you shouldn't be asked for one, but you have it if they do. All right. So if I lived at the Tenley Library, this would be what's on my ballot, and you can see it's considerably shorter than what's on the Montgomery County ballot. But I have a referendum on the ballot that I need to decide about. So we've put the referendum, and the text of the referendum. We've put a little background there, defining some of the terms. We've put what the proponents for the referendum say, and we've also put in what the opponents of the referendum say, and also given you links to where you can read more. So in a referendum, you're asked to vote yes or no. And down here, we've reiterated what it means. Like, a yes vote means that you agree to this, this, and this, and a no vote means that you reject the referendum. Sometimes it's not always clear the way the referendum is phrased, whether you should vote yes or no. Just even if you know which way you feel, you're not sure you select the right yes or no. So we try to make it as clear as possible and give you links so that you can go back and find out more, because we couldn't, if you put too much in a voter guide, people may or may not read it. Okay, so I can do this. I have Board of Education members running this time. This case, all 3 of them participated in our guide, yes. I would still choose 2 to compare them. And then I can see their qualifications and their Twitter feed and all that good stuff. So that's what I would see, because actually this is my district. So this is what I'm going to be asked to vote on. But if I lived in Arlington, uh-oh, what's the Arlington address? Quincy Street. Darn, I should have written it down, right? I think it's a 1. Ah, there it is, 1015. All right. Oops. Oh, 22201, right? All right. Virginia always has some constitutional amendment on the ballot, it seems, and it's always complicated. So the league tries to cut through all of the nonsense, and like, for instance, there's a tax relief constitutional right to work. Let's see what's the Metro Trans. A lot of local jurisdictions will have bond measures where they're asking you to vote for a bond. Let's see what the Metro is. Contracted debt. So it's not, oh, here we go. So at least they're giving you the county's explanation here, a link to the full details on what the county is asking for here. And like I said, they're here being asked to vote on another bond issue. And then see who's running for Congress. 3 people running for Congress. Okay. And you can always do the same thing. You go through, you can check the one that you like the most and go for. Does anybody have any questions about?
For instance, if we live here, we live here around the area,
Mhm.
2 blocks from here.
Uh-huh.
So, is there there is an issue about the homeless building? I don't know if you are familiar with this. This is one of the points that could be in the ballot.
If a group of citizens wished to place it on the ballot, it could be an initiative when it comes from the students, when it comes from the voters, if it comes from the residents, it would be an initiative. A referendum is a vote on a piece of legislation where they're asking the whole group to vote on it, like the statehood. You will be asked to vote on the statehood referendum if you live in the city. Right, and then, but that homeless issue is not on the ballot now. It actually takes quite a bit to get it onto the ballot. It has to have a certain number of signatures. The signatures have to be verified. It has to go to the Board of Elections to their attorneys determine whether it's legal. Because you can't put an initiative up that's illegal, that might discriminate against someone. Okay, any other questions? Is this the kind of information that you were kind of hoping to find, or? Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. And the Vote 411 is a nationwide program. So if you live in Colorado, if you live in California, you can check and see whether there's a league that's done one for that. Okay, so play around with it. I encourage you to show other people. Everyone I've showed thought it was really useful to know all this in advance. And if you're really interested, the presidential candidates are in here too. So you could take a look at what they had to say to us. Okay, but then there are a couple of other ways that you can find out information. If you want to just not rely just on Vote 411, or if perhaps your jurisdiction, I don't know about your county. Are you in Prince? I know you're in Maryland, but Anne Arundel. Yeah, I don't know about Anne Arundel, but we could take a look afterwards. There is a very cool search engine called search.usa. Oops, who did that? If anybody copied this down, I had a malfunction this morning. Search.usa.gov. And what this does is it's like a Google, but just for government websites. And that would be state governments, some foreign governments, and also military. So some file extensions like the Army and the Navy, they're .mil, whereas the Justice Department is .gov. Okay, so this is really useful if anybody's a student, because this will search for government reports, and our government writes reports on the most amazing variety of things. It's just, somebody wanted a paper on wanted information on an environmental disaster in Malaysia, and we weren't finding anything. And I just said, well, when I'm in doubt, when I exhaust everything, I'll just go to search.usa.gov. And the EPA had actually written a report on this exact disaster because it could well have been replicated in other countries, so it had relevance. And there was also an Agency for International Development report on it. So it's got great stuff. But you can, sometimes sometimes you don't know where voting information is located. Some states, it's the Secretary of State's office. Some states, it's the Public Records Office. You just never know where voter information is going to be. So when you don't know for sure, you can always just try. Did I spell it right? So Minnesota has its own website called Minnesota Votes, so we have a lot of information in Vote 411 like this, but you might want to also look for whatever state you're looking at. You can also look at voter ID requirements to see if you can find the website for the state. So that's the official thing. The final word is from the office. So that's search.usa.gov. Then there's always a lot of talk about money in politics. The Supreme Court Citizens United case made it more difficult to track money in politics, but there's still a few good ways to do that. And one of them is a website called opensecrets.org. And they have different information on interest groups. These interest groups have these names like Americans for you name it, and you look at it and you say, what in the world is this, and who are these people? Open Secrets will try to help you figure it out. It's hard because they get their information from required filings, and the filings requirements have been relaxed greatly. But at least we can take a try. If you're considering voting for someone, you might want to look that person's name up. Like, let's just see this. Jamie Raskin is running for Congress in the state of Maryland, and he is also, I guess, still. I don't think he left, did he? I think he's still a professor at our Washington College of Law. So, but you might want to see who's given him money. You might want to take a look and see what you find out about your candidate before you vote for him.
Also for presidents and vice presidents, for everybody
You can sure try. It's whatever information they can find. So sometimes it's not so easy. That's why they call it dark money, because it's hard to see who is giving the money and who they're giving it to. But at least whatever we can find out, Open Secrets is on it. And it's nonpartisan too. And the other one that's one of my favorites is factcheck.org. This is also a nonpartisan. They take off after Republicans and Democrats alike. The sad part is you find they all spin the truth. Some of them are just spin it out of control, and some of it spin it a little bit. But anyway, things like when somebody said, we're talking about stop and frisk, that's been a big issue with the campaign, and somebody said it was unconstitutional, and they'll check that fact. This is out of the Annenberg Center. These are journalism students who are doing this. So you can fact check the VP debate and see what's true and what's not true, or most of it's partly true. Partly true.
Factcheck.org is not on a political site. It's also, I saw Zika information. Zika for that one, those blindness. It's for another kind of research.
It's facts that are put out there
In the media.
in the media, because the Annenberg Public Policy Center, that's a media organization. They study media and attempt to reveal when people aren't telling the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. Okay. So that's kind of what I wanted to share with you today, and I didn't know if people had questions. There are other ways you can find out about different political organizations will offer fact-checking. Politico has a fact check. I like to go to factcheck.org myself because I feel like they're the most nonpartisan. Did you have any questions, or is there anything here that any questions you have that maybe I could help answer?
I'm so sorry to bother.
You're not, I think probably when one person has a question, generally others have questions, so please.
I would like to know if you know if we will receive the ballot like we received for the first election in 2 months or 3 months ago. We will receive by mail the ballot in this opportunity for running for president and for this election.
As far as I know, DC will issue a voter guide that will have what's on your ballot. I can show you how to find the ballots are on the internet, and actually we might be able to find them by using search.usa.gov. But what the individual jurisdictions don't do is ask questions and have the candidates respond to them. Usually it'll just show you what's on the ballot. So it might say, referendum on statehood, but you don't really know, well, what exactly does that mean? So let's just take a look, actually, and see if Yep. It only gives me so many characters. So another trick is if you want to search by a phrase, because I really don't want any other kind of Columbia, I only want the District of Columbia. You can use quotation marks to search as a phrase. I might still not get it. Okay, we're coming up with lots of stuff, but not what I want. So we'll go to dc.gov, which is the DC government website, and we're going to search for well, right here, general election sample ballot. So this is what your ballot's going to look like. In DC, we print the ballot in English and in Spanish. And so you'll be asked to mark the circle completely with what you, and in DC, this is really important, you have to vote both sides of the ballot. It's front and back. And a lot of times people don't flip it over. So that's an important thing to know. So here's this is what it'll look like to choose for president. And then we in DC have these little advisory neighborhood commissions. Each commissioner represents 2,000 people. You'll be asked to vote on commissioner two, and that's generally, we are the only guide that includes ANCs, the only one, because there are just 300 and some odd of them. There's one person who represents each, would represent you, and they sit on a commission that's usually between 4 and 8 people, depending on the geographic size of the ANC. I have a pamphlet that I can give to you that explains the political geography of DC. Are you voting in DC? No, okay. Okay. So.
And what happens if we say we vote for president and for the district delegate and not for the other one? This vote is counted or
Yes.
not?
Yes. You do not need to vote for every position. In some elections, some places, if you don't have a complete ballot, it will be rejected. So it's a really good question to ask. But in DC, you could just vote for president and go home if that's what you wanted, or just go and vote for ANC and go home. But we encourage people not to do that, because bad people are elected when good people stay home or don't educate themselves. Because in a democracy, our democracy is predicated on people who educate themselves before they go to the polls. So pay attention and participate. Yeah.
I also have heard, and I don't know, that's why I am asking you, that if we don't like any of the candidates for presidency and vice presidents, people can write their own name or say.
They absolutely can.
But this is true?
This is absolutely true. But you do need to ask, write in.
Another person.
Yeah, anybody. I've had people tell me they're going to vote for their dog. But I will give you the League of Women Voters line on this, and you can accept or reject. But there are 4 people running for president, and one of those 4 people are going to be president, whether you write in your dog or whether you stay home. One of those 4 people. So what the League encourages everyone to do is to look at each candidate and determine what percentage of that candidate do you feel represents you or agrees with you, and whichever person gets the highest percentage, that's the person you vote for, because one of those 4 people is going to be president, and you should make your voice heard and your vote count. If you vote for Mickey Mouse, your vote doesn't count, and then you haven't really exercised your full, this is without trying to preach, your responsibility as a voter is to choose one of the people who's elected. And even if you only agree with 5% of one person, if that's greater than the 0.2% and the 0.1% and the nothing from the other 3, that's how you make up your mind. Because you want the person who's running, who best represents you, even if you don't like that person, who best represents you, to be the person who's elected. So that's what we try to encourage people to do in the League, and not, I mean, a protest vote, people will call something a protest vote, but there's really no such thing as protest vote. It doesn't do anything. I mean, when you protest, you want to call attention to something that's wrong or could be better. But when you just go into the ballot, go toward the ballot box in your polling place, and you don't vote for one of those people, it's not really a statement. It's just throwing your vote. So it's a tough thing. You're never going to find a candidate that represents you 100%. I mean, if person might be perfect, but you don't like this person's stance on these 2 or 3 things. But Abraham Lincoln said you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. So Okay.
And are there opportunities where, for instance, someone said, I want to belong to the Democratic Party, and going to the real election and after the debates and et cetera, this person decides to go for the Green Party? Is that
Oh, absolutely. When you register as a party, you are under no obligation to vote for that party in a general election.
in the general?
In the general election. Now, what I believe all of the surrounding jurisdictions have political primaries and what we call closed political primaries, which means that only Democrats can vote in the Democratic primary, only Republicans can vote in the Republican primary. And this is because the Democrats are choosing the one candidate to represent them. The Republicans are choosing the one candidate to represent them. So if you want to participate in a primary election, you should register with a party. But for the general election, you can vote for anyone you want to, including Mickey Mouse. You can do that. I mean, you can do that and nobody will know but you. That's the beauty of a secret ballot, but yes, that's what a closed primary means.
I have a question.
Okay?
I often wonder about some of the down ballot candidates at the county level where I am. And I know, for instance, in the news I've heard recently that some of our county people have been arrested for various things. Is that the kind of thing you can find in any of these, or is there another way you can find out if there's a history of wrongdoing?
Well, since you work at the AU Library, I might be inclined to do a search on the Washington Post. Or certainly Google the person, but whenever you use Google, make sure that you pay attention to the source.
Yeah.
Because you can read anything about anything on the email. I had a friend of mine who went to Yale, for God's sake, post something about what the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, was going to do to Fox News. I'm like, oh, Gil, that's like, no. I mean, that's not within the purview of the Federal Election Commission. So you should know better than that. but so don't believe,
Right.
I would say believe probably 5%. But look at who's writing it down, who's saying that. Because
I just wondered if there was any kind of like convicted record for politicians.
well,
website.
there is
accurate.
certainly a sex offender register. So if they've been accused of if they've been convicted of a sex offense, yes, you can check that.
But none of the others. Stealing, embezzlement. There's no embezzlers registry.
Let's see. That's a really interesting question. Let's see what, because the court records are the police records. I think I would
Stick to the news.
I would try the news. And is everybody here current AU faculty and staff? Because I can show you. You know how to check the Washington Post? The question was, how do we find out whether these people have been arrested or convicted or so if we go to search databases and LexisNexis, this includes, what we have here is the academic version. This is not what the law school has. But you could certainly you can search by Washington Post here. You can set the date range and search by their name. You might get a lot of, if they have a common name, it might be hard to do.
But I could also search by like Anne Arundel County.
Yes, but the deal with searching newspapers is that word has to appear in the article.
Yeah.
So if
But
everybody
it's-
knows
but
that
if
it's
you're
Anne
an
Arundel.
elected person for that county, it generally would. Because it would be the Anne Arundel County Executive or something like that.
Yeah. So play around with putting in different search terms, the name plus different search terms, and see.
An open secret is not good for this kind of cases.
They would only tell you who had given the person money. Open secrets is money.
With money, okay,
It's tracking the money.
okay.
And it takes Federal Election Commission filings and see who's giving money to whom. Yeah. But more than likely, if you just Google it, it's going to pop up, and just be really careful of your source. Yeah. Down ballot issues it's tough to be an educated voter, but they're.
Well, it is, and you know, when the sheriff gets arrested for beating his wife, you kind of want to know that if he's up for re-election.
I agree completely.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I'm so glad. I don't think we sent any DC City Council members to jail this year, and I'm so happy. Because that meant we didn't have another special election to cover. Do you know how many special elections I've had to cover? Because our people didn't behave themselves. Okay, well, if there are any other questions, I'm happy to answer them. If you want to come up and try your address, okay, we could do that too. And otherwise, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
You're
thank you,
welcome.
Catherine.